we don't actually deal with it all the time in an authentic way. I mean, we just don't. Sometimes the story is, and there are other movies that are trying to, but I dismiss the ones that don't, that relegate the people to just black hat and white hat. I think it was terribly complicated. And when we do that, an audience can lean into behaviors that they suddenly are wondering themselves about, which is, if it was really like that, could I have made that? Would I have even gone? What would I do? We talk about the origin of this town, which most Westerns never even deal with the origin of town. They're just there automatically. Every Western you've ever seen, the town is there. But if you really want to get down to it, those towns were contested. What was their real story? And in Horizon, you'll find out in the fourth one that it's a lie. It's actually a complete lie of how that town, what went down. But you understand that people were there before the first stake went in the ground. So they have to be a part of it. We have to understand the confusion, what we did. We threw their life into chaos. He's the one that's not headed that way, but it's circumstance that keeps pulling him. And you'll see that as 2 goes and as 3 goes. You'll see how it happens to him. The others, are going on a promise. There's a piece of paper. There's a town out there if you can get there. Well, they don't have anything on the East Coast, and so they go. Americans were always in search of something better, and the picture was pretty enough. We Americans are sold bills of good all the time, and somebody gets somewhere and goes, "This isn't what it was supposed to be," but they already have our money. Utah just created so many looks for me. I just didn't want to do it anywhere else. It was what fit this particular story, and I'm just stubborn enough that I'll hold out till I'm there. I have a great art director and Derek Hill and JR and people that are just, they're vested in historical accuracy. They understand how it lends itself to a story, and they trust, that I'm going to shoot it, that I'm going to make sure it lines up in my, and it doesn't matter if they make a really beautiful town and I go off and shoot something and you go, well, I made this whole thing, can you find a way to show it off? Jimmy Morrow was my Steadicam for Field of Dreams, and for Dancer with Wolves, I asked him to be his first DP job for Open Range, and when I realized I was going to have half the time I did on Dances was 106, this was 52, I knew I needed somebody that was willing to sacrifice his own aesthetic, which was, let's wait for the best light, and somebody that was willing to film the story. So my hat is really off to him, because you can understand the vanity of a DP going, God, I'm out in this beautiful place. If we just waited 2 hours, that would be so beautiful, Kevin. I said, we don't have that time. Let's shoot our story. And instead of complaining, he just did it. There ought to be an award for that too. I'd watched her, but then when I really started to watch her, I realized how nuanced she was, how good she was. I'd not met Abbey Lee, and I'd not met Ella. Jena Malone I'd worked with twice. I had not met Isabelle Fuhrman, but when I saw them, I really saw how they fit. And those 3 actresses right there, and Jena Malone, they're incredible. The performances they've given they're really noteworthy. People should take notice of their acting, and when you see them in 2, even more dynamic. You'll really begin to understand how gifted they are in an American Western. They drive almost every storyline, and they're resourceful, and they were brought out against their will, and they were worked to death. And the simplest things that we take for granted, just keeping themselves clean, was a 24-hour proposition with the dirt, with everything. So I relate so much to, the women have really propped this movie up. That's why I took all of them to Cannes. My son Hayes, who I named after the namesake of this character, I thank God that I was able to actually make Horizon, and he could be in it with me. And he did a really wonderful job. He was very poignant. I hope that they appreciate where this was filmed. But more importantly, I made a story that I thought they could relate to, that could terrify them, that could thrill them, that could make them understand that it's not a land in Disneyland. To know that they only know their own language is to know why there was breakdown in communications. People couldn't talk. So it just, you brought out the worst in people. White people didn't know their language, but they just kept coming. They showed a piece of paper to a Native American who had no idea. It was important to understand. They just didn't share the same language. The Native Americans didn't get the message. I mean, they became inconveniences in their own country.
I think that examining the inception of whatever the America is that we know today, like how did that begin? How was the West settled? It was such an incredibly interesting moment in history. And to explore that with Kevin Costner, who is the master of this genre, to be in these landscapes with this incredible cast and beautiful costumes and animals, and it was so authentic. It was really special.
Sam?
Yeah, I think, like, to me, I grew up watching Kevin's movies, and they represent American culture. And, you know, his westerns that he's done with, say, Wyatt Earp, even the baseball movies. He was in a movie about Al Capone. He was in a movie with JFK. He was in a movie, you know, with the Kennedys, the 13 Days. So he's examining, you know, this great land, and obviously has a hope for where it can go. And to me, that is kind of what Horizon's doing. It's showing where we've come from, and all these people being settled in this country, and with hopes and dreams of how great this country can be. And I think, you know, at the times they're going to come into conflict, but it's how you get through that conflict that's important. And I think, you know, to me, that was what Kevin was trying to say with Horizon.
I play Frances Kittredge, who is a pioneer woman. She's moved from, I imagine, the East Coast with her husband and 2 children, and she is very quickly confronted with disaster. But she's resourceful and courageous and inspiring.
I play Lieutenant Trent Gephart. The character, I think, is there as an authority figure, but is unsure of his role. I think he doesn't know what the frontier wars are, and thinks it'd probably be better to stay back and fight in a civil war, a war that he understands. And within that, he finds his own horizon, which is Sienna's character.
I think she's very resentful of the circumstances she finds herself in, and the futility of it and the waste of life, but she doesn't have any choice. You know, once you've gone that far and you've made that journey, you can't turn back. So she makes the best of a situation that I think she doesn't want to be in for the sake of her daughter.
I think if you're trying to find your own kind of settlement, she gives him an emotional settlement maybe, or the potential for something to be settled. At the same time, I think he sees in her the resilience and a strength that maybe he is struggling with himself. And yeah, I always look at it as sometimes this is a bunch of people who are searching for something, and sometimes you can't actually see that it's right in front of you, what you need.
Danny, I've known for years. He's a friend, and so any opportunity to spend time with him is heaven on earth. Yeah. Rooker is just hysterical and so much fun, and such a well-loved actor as well. But Georgia, she looks so grown up now, but she was so little on the first one, and she's so talented. She's so open and available to emote, and it really broke my heart. You know, Kevin was so sensitive and sweet and tender the way he directed her, and she was able to cry, and then I'd sort of console her afterwards. But she's a really special talent. It's exciting to see where she'll go. You're
only as good as the actor opposite. They're the ones that give you the character. They're the ones that help you open up. They're the ones that make you better. So I got to work with the elite. I think Kevin, to me, is a very particular director because he's had this idea for 30 years. He understands the detail of what he wants to achieve with it. That's always a good thing. You know, details to me is what makes a director, because that gives you confidence that you're just there to help them facilitate their vision. And if they don't have a vision, you're going to get kind of lost. But his is so strong and so definite. Yeah, he's just in love with this moment in history, and
in love with America and is so knowledgeable and so generous and so passionate that enthusiasm, it's almost childlike, is just infectious. So every day, and he loves movies. So every day you go to work with somebody who's thrilled to be there, and that's contagious. It really is a character in the film, the landscape and the elements that we were battling, and he just embraced all of it. It's the most beautiful landscape you can imagine, and also unforgiving, and that helps with performance. You know, there would be a dust storm that would roll in, or a huge storm with lightning overhead and equipment, and it was quite treacherous in moments, but we all embraced it because it all adds to the drama of what you're creating. Of course, thinking about how did America begin, and it being such a young country in terms of the settlers, not the indigenous people, obviously. But I loved learning more, and especially spending time understanding the role of women in the settling of America.
Yeah, I always try to have an appreciation of wherever I'm at.
I think that people will be blown away by the beauty of the vistas, and the technical aspects of this film are so stunning, from the costumes to the lighting to the, and the performances are incredible. I think that it's really laying the foundations for a journey that is filled with depth, and yeah, it's a beautiful film to watch.
Yeah, and it's good to be part of something that isn't racing towards action or just gunfights. You're working on a more nuanced level. You know, when I watched Field of Dreams for the first time, it ended with the climax was a father and son playing catch. It's very simple, but it means so much. It's so powerful, and I think Kevin puts that into all his work. It's the beauty of the simplicity of life. You know, the beauty that we sometimes take for granted. That's what he's trying to focus on.
I just love that it's such a different take on a Western, showcasing women. I don't think I've seen a Western done before where it's a lot of strong women, and what we had to go through back in those times. It's always about the men, which is great, but it's nice to see kind of the struggle that everybody went through from a new perspective. Yeah. Owen?
Yeah, like Wasé said, it's the narrative is so like wide that I feel that it catches a lot of different perspectives, and how it the perspective of the women back then are, you don't see that in a typical Western. You see all the cowboys and the badasses. But yeah, I mean, Horizon definitely has that too. It has whatever you're looking for in a film. I think Horizon captures a lot. It's a roller coaster.
For me, it was the opportunity to work with Kevin Costner, right, legend in the business, and he was writing and directing and acting in it, so that really intrigued me.
I play Pionsenay, and when we first meet him, he's White Mountain Apache. When we first meet him, he's trying to take the peaceful route on things, on take a peaceful route on just moving forward and how to deal with the westward expansion. But it comes to a point where he has to make the decision that, this is enough, and he chooses to be the resistance against the westward expansion. So yeah, he eventually leaves the tribe to continue to fight and push back against the settlers.
My character's name is Taklishim, and he's the brother to Pionsenay. And the thing about him is, he's one of the warriors definitely in the tribe, but he has a family, he has a wife and a child, he has something else to look out for. I think before, he would want to be riding out there with the Pionsenay, and but now he kind of has, other things to think about.
I play Liluye, which is his wife, and we meet her. She's, having to deal with kind of the consequences of their actions, but she's like, traditional Native way women kind of, we were matriarchal societies, and so no matter what, women kind of just did what they wanted to do, and so even though I respect my husband and, allow him to be his own person and do what he wants to do, I'm still like, I don't feel good about this, and ultimately I do remain loyal to him and what he wants to do, but I think she's a strong character that shows like that women weren't just, told what to do and made to have to listen to them, but yeah. For me, it was making sure it was right for Apache Nation and, making sure that they're represented in a good way, and that was my main, I just wanted it to be right, because there's nothing worse than like, our languages are already they're dying out, and it's important to keep them alive, and so I just felt like a big responsibility to do it right. And Aurelia, who is our language coach, she was amazing. She was so patient with everyone, and like we were there for I think 2 weeks with her every day, all day, studying, and she's just the sweetest person. She just like doesn't want to tell anybody that they're messing up, but we're like, no, you have to tell us if we're messing up because we want to get it right. And so towards the end, she got more comfortable with us and was like, that was bad, do it again. Yeah, so it was just really great working with her, and the great thing about Kevin is he's always wanting to make sure everything's really authentic as well. So, I felt a lot of pressure on the day to make sure it was right, and working with these two was really awesome. Hearing the difference between the women language and men, because they speak differently in White Mountain Apache.
It was a really good experience, but like what's the way Wasé said, she hit it right on the button, that we want it to be like, we want to do the Apache language some justice. We don't we put in all the work, even before we sat in the classroom with her. We were on Zoom for I think a month before that, every day, just back and forth, learning our lines, just to yeah, because like, and I think that it's like having the language in the movie, it's a great tool in preserving a language that is slowly dying, and which I think that this would be a great tool to help to keep the language alive.
Yeah, just as Native people, we're not Apache, but we come from other tribes, and we have our own languages. And when you see that represented on film, you want it to be accurate, and especially during this time. I mean, this is how everybody was communicating with each other, was through their own language. So we had to speak the Apache language, to do justice to everybody during that time. And so when you see yourself on film, you see your people represented on film, you want it to be good, you want it to sound good, you want it to be good enough that everybody back home can understand what you're saying, and I think that Kevin brought in a great dialect coach, and I think everybody back home is going to be proud, and that's what we want to do, is make people proud, and especially with this language, we want the young people to see it, back home, the kids to see their language on the big screen, and hopefully empower them to continue learning and speaking their language.
I mean, I think it's a great look at, just how everybody's world kind of intertwines, and how somebody's decisions impacts a whole, family or tribe, or, it's really interesting to see the different perspectives. There's like the bad guys, there's the good guys, there's some that are good and bad. It's just not always black and white, and it's just a really diverse cast, and yeah.
Tatanka?
I mean, I think it's very important for filmmakers to include Indigenous people in their stories, especially stories like this. During this time, and elevating our voices and having that kind of representation on screen. And I'm proud to that to be included and to represent our people during this time, and especially us, because it's hard for us as Native people in Hollywood, because sometimes other people get cast in our roles who aren't fully Native, who didn't come from where we come from. Maybe they claim some Native in them, but all of us are enrolled members of our tribes, and it's something big to happen, and especially on this level. So I think we're all pretty proud to represent and to have this level of storytelling and exposure to the world. 'Cause I think a long time ago in the old westerns, that was kind of another side to it, and I think we're trying to do better, and Kevin's obviously doing that in this film.
The different perspectives that it shows, I think that's an important thing, because like Wasé said, there's bad guys and there's good guys, but it also it depends on the perspective. Like, this person's bad, but this person's good. But I mean, let's look at it from the other side. Hey, this person's good, and and it also shows it's really not just black and white. It shows why people make the decisions that they make, and that it does affect these other people, but I mean, they're not really actually they're not doing that to those people. They're actually doing something for themselves, and it's affecting the other group of people, and the story captures that really in a great way. It shows okay, well, we're all trying to live, and we're all trying to do our thing, but there's somebody else that's encroaching on what we're doing here. And so, and depending on perspective, everybody's right or everybody's wrong.
The writing, being honest with you, that was the first, I picked up the script and I was just so immersed in the world, immersed in the characters. And Kevin Costner, Western, I mean, what's there not to love within that world, And I'm always up for exploration of what it means to be human, why people are the way that they are. And I feel like this is a really good, a good study of humanity, and both are the greatest parts of ourselves and also the not so great parts of ourselves.
I play Marigold, and she is a prostitute who's living in a small mining town, who quickly has to sort of scurry out of there because she sees a tragic event that she doesn't want to be witness to. And so she then sort of spends the rest of the time on the road. And I think just as a person, she is a woman trapped in a time that doesn't suit her. She's a woman who wants to be free, who wants to be independent, who has a lot of hopes, has a lot of dreams, but isn't really given the right to have those hopes and dreams because she was a woman of that era when women were bound to men, basically. So for me, Marigold is, I think she's a gypsy at heart. A drifter.
I play Caleb Sykes, the oldest brother of the Sykes family, who are the meanest, toughest family, and probably the biggest family within Horizon as well, the film American Saga. And we are on a sort of journey of revenge and of resentment to go and retrieve something that we both believe belongs to us, and also, I don't know what's the right word here, carry out our vengeance onto the person who has harmed a member of our family. He's driven by power. He is driven, I think, ultimately probably by fear. I've always seen him as a child of trauma. We see his mother hit him quite early on in the film, and I think that you know, there's certainly a world in which that's not the first time that's happened, and this is probably something that's gone on for some time. So I picked up on that, and I was like, yeah, I'll take this. This sounds good to me. Me and my brother, Junior, are on a you know, we're on a ride. We're coming to get her. I described it earlier as sort of like a rubber band being pulled and then sort of contracted again. There's these sort of great moments of tension followed by this sort of brief period release and then stretching it out so much that the band eventually just snaps, and that's so much fun to play with. It was, you know, something that we rehearsed over a few days whilst Kevin was obviously directing other scenes as well, and just sort of grabbing moments when we could and how we could figure out, because, you know, it's a fairly long shot, and it was interesting because we shot quite a lot of it kind of steady cam, but then obviously there are these great moments where we just break and we have these kind of still moments of tension, and then it breaks away again and we travel up. But to go head to head and to kind of face off with Kevin, I love those moments of confrontation as an actor. I just think they're great. They're super fun. And to do it with somebody as amazing as Kevin, who trusts and both trusts himself and believes in us too, is a dream.
He's a very natural actor. He immerses himself in the world, and he's got a lot of passion for filmmaking, a lot of passion for acting. And it means that when you're in a scene with him, whether he's directing you or acting with you, for me, most of the time it was a combination of both. You just had a sense of a man who's very present, very relaxed, very natural with you, and very supportive. As a director, he's a very supportive man. He gives you a lot of freedom, a lot of space. He's very available to you. If you can never talk about a scene too much or a character too much. He just gives himself over to you as you need him, and then also gives you a lot of space. But I did find it quite fascinating working with him as an actor, because there was no sense of you weren't working with someone who's like acting, which can often happen. You're like working with a man who's just with you in a scene, who's communicating, and that felt refreshing, and it gave me ease.
For me, there's two things. One is you get to see America like I've never seen it on the big screen before. I mean that. Like, I love this part of the world. I spent a lot of time there, and to see that on camera with the technology that we have nowadays, and to kind of have it like blasted in your face, it's really like nothing else. And I think also on the other side of that as well, this is a story, like we said earlier, it's about people, the best of people and the worst of people too. And there's a humanity to that. And I think you could take any character out of that world and put them somewhere else, and you'd still be able to relate to them. And that's really cool. That means a lot to me. There's a lot of heart to this. And I think also you'll just feel the passion. I think that's what you'll feel. It's like when somebody puts their heart and soul into something, you feel that. And that's what Kevin's done, and that's hopefully what we've all done as well, because that's how we all felt at the time of making this thing.
I think they're going to see something they've never seen before, because it really is truly the story of America as it was expanding in that time. And I think Westerns are generally fall along the line of like cool cowboys, like slinging guns about, whereas it's rooted in the reality of what was going on in America at the time. So I think they're going to be fascinated to see visually what was going on rather than just read about it all. And also it's brilliant because you get to see so many women living in the time, which is unusual and not done often, and what it was like for women and for children and for Native Americans and for all different demographics of people that were living in that time, rather than just the usual men, which is often depicted in Westerns.
When you're there and you're in it, and it just elevates everything. You're fully immersed and submerged into this world. And like I said, I love this part of the world, and I've spent a lot of time there. And so when you're working in that environment, it just makes you realize that this is a real place that still exists. It's as it was and as it always will be. Hopefully.
For me, there was a lot of frustration. There was like I'm in the corset. I've got these heavy skirts hanging off me. There's dirt. There's a lot of like information. You know, the elements are crazy. I'm like freezing and it's windy and there's donkeys screaming, and it was all so helpful for me because I was playing a woman who was frustrated constantly. She was at her core frustrated with her life and with the world. So I found it really helpful to be frustrated as an actor on set, just because it is dusty and it is cold and the corsets are really painful, and so it made it very real. It made the experience even more real for me.
I was so drawn to the distinctiveness of the women in the films. I feel like Kevin is sort of an archivist, and over the past 20, 30 years, he's been collecting these unsung stories, and a lot of these voices are of women, and I was so excited to play this woman traveling west with her husband on a dream of the life that they could live, with this complete naivety about what their journey was going to entail and the dangers of this new frontier. And we really get to watch her transformation and her struggle, and it tested me as an actor in ways that I've never been tested before, but I was in really safe hands with Kevin, and I was as passionate as he was about telling her story with care, and I had a beautiful time doing it.
Reading all 4 scripts, I was just so floored by how epic and massive this movie was, but at the same time, how intimate and close you get to each character and the decisions that they had to make for their own survival, and how this, you know, big hope and journey westward shaped each person in such unique and transformative ways, and shaped our history in a lot of ways. And through the eyes of, you know, characters that we hadn't normally seen at the forefront of the Western genre, like women, like, you know, the indigenous, and it really felt like we were uncovering something that hadn't been presented in this genre space before. And for Diamond specifically, I mean, to think of playing a young woman who grows over the course of 15 years in this 4-part saga, who really was kind of dragged onto this journey westward with her dad, and, you know, is living out his dream and his hope and realizing that that might not be what she wants, and how this journey westward really shapes her into the woman that she becomes, and getting to collaborate with Kevin on that and work with someone like him who, from every marrow of his being and pore, you could see the passion that he has had for this project for so many years. It was just a very easy yes.
Yeah, what drew me was obviously, you know, Kevin and the great script. I read 1 and 2 when I got hired for the job. And, you know, I'd grown up a big fan of Kevin's from Silverado. It was kind of his star-making turn. That was a great Larry Kasdan Western. And then I loved, you know, every movie he directed. So I was kind of a loyal fan just from, you know, from the beginning, from when I was a kid. So, you know, that made me feel a real connection to him. And then reading the script that he and John Baird wrote was just so interesting. And I love Westerns, but the idea that you'd read something and think, wow, I've never seen that before. I've never thought about that before. Like, I've never thought, like, you have to have water, not just for the people on the trail. You have to have enough water for the animals that are getting everybody. So just things that kind of, you know, make you think about the reality of the situation. And so, yeah, and then also just, you know, about telling the story of the women on the trail, because that's half the story, which is, you don't hear as much. You know, I think that Clint Eastwood did kind of a cool job with it in Unforgiven. There was that interesting part where the women in the saloon kind of were the, you know, that's where the story started, and that was one cool thing about Unforgiven. So I think this is kind of has elements of that. I play Van Weyden, who's the captain of the wagon train headed from western Kansas out to, you know, this town of Horizon in Arizona that may or may not exist yet. And I've been elected to this leadership role that I didn't even necessarily want. So not only do I have, you know, 2 young daughters and a wife that I'm trying to take care of, I have now all these, you know, settlers, pioneers that are a part of this 30 wagon train, and just trying, like I say in the second movie, just trying to get as many of us as I can, as far as I can. So that's who my character is.
I play Diamond Kittredge. She is a young woman on the wagon train with her father and her 2 other sisters, and she's very precocious. She's definitely a woman ahead of her time. She's been raised along with her sisters to be very prepared for this sort of journey, and very much in her masculine energy, stable hand. She can pick up anything and jump into action when needed, but through this, journey westward and meeting characters like Juliette, she starts to realize that there might be real power in femininity, and decides that she wants to be in control of that destiny for herself, and wants to be in control of her own journey in her life, not under the thumb of her father. And we really get to see her grow throughout, the entirety of the saga, and I'm very excited for people to see where she goes, because she gets a little crazy.
I play Juliette, who is traveling west with her husband Hugh. They are an English couple. He is an artist, she is a teacher. And like I said before, she's very naive about what her journey is going to entail, and is faced with some extraordinarily difficult situations, and goes through quite the transformation, and is sort of transformed by the people around her in some bleak ways and some very beautiful ones. She shares a character arc with Isabelle's character Diamond. They sort of inform each other, and they both teach each other something about womanhood and the life for women in the 1800s on the frontier. And she was the character of my girlhood movie-making dreams. It was a thrill to play her.
I feel that Diamond has definitely been raised in a very specific way by her father, and wants to do good by her father and make him proud. And a lot of that has been, riding horses forked in a saddle, doing things that were very against what women at that time did. And that was what got her the attention from him. And, I don't want to toot her own horn, but, she's kind of the favorite of the family in a sense. And meeting Juliette, I think, really floors her, because she's never seen a woman like her out in this environment. And I feel that her initial introduction to Juliette is maybe not the most positive, but it grows into a fascination, because there's something about her that she can't help but feel connected to. And as their stories entwine throughout the wagon train, Diamond really becomes the first person to be there for Juliette in
To witness
support
her.
and to witness her and see what she is going through. And I feel like that's such a beautiful message for these 2 women that are on this journey together, that through Juliette seeing that someone else is not turning away, and is able to look at her and understand that this is really difficult, that they form this connection that really informs both of their growth.
I think one of the themes that I love that Kevin explores in these films is how a collective can be complicit in violence, especially violence towards women.
Yeah.
And that a lot of the time that complicity comes out of a need to survive, and a fear for one's own. And that can make a woman alone on the trail very vulnerable. But I think that when Juliette first sees Diamond and her sisters, she sees these 3 young women who are being bullied by their father, who are being, she literally says, kicked and bullied into being fine young men. And it's a very narrow view of these girls, but it's not a dishonest one. And I think as the films go along, she's able to admire the strength of Diamond, and especially admire that Diamond is able to look Juliette in the eye when nobody else can.
And Diamond's really fearless in that way.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think that, Juliette gleans from Diamond in a sense, is like to step into this like fearlessness and bravery that's within her the whole time.
Yeah.
And I feel that Diamond learns from Juliette that there's there's a lot of power in morality, and that there is something to be said about that, even at this time where so much is focused on survival.
Yeah.
That people can be complicit in things, and you can't just like turn a blind eye to things when they're wrong. You have to stand up for them and
Diamond
say.
is sort of the eyes of the audience with Juliette's storyline as well. Diamond is seeing what the audience is seeing, and Diamond is asking the same questions of her community that the audience is asking. Like, why aren't you doing something? Diamond starts to ask.
And she full on, you know, is willing to sit across the table from the people doing, you know, wrong by her and stare at them toe to toe. And that is something that you don't see of women at that time period, at least in a Western, but I'm sure was something that was experienced. And it starts to become this, you know, infectious thing amongst the women on the wagon train, that they all start to turn their faces towards Juliette and realize that they are being complicit in this. It's not just the men.
Kevin keeps saying, like, you know, now it's a meal and a nap and put your seatbelt on in your landing, where, you know, in the era of our film is when you said goodbye, it was potentially goodbye forever. The weather and the land, and then, you know, coming through these kind of territories that were dangerous because of different Native American tribes that were not only, you know, warring against each other at times, but certainly did not want, you know, these white settlers, you know, passing through their land, especially not, you know, trying to establish a town, you know, in the land that they'd settled hundreds of years ago or longer. It's great because it's like one-stop shopping. He wrote it, he directed it, he's acting in it, he produced it, he financed it. So it's not the kind of thing where, like, okay, I hear your opinion, let me go ask another guy. Like, you know, if you were, you know, Kevin was telling you to do something, that was kind of, you know,
Gospel.
That was it. And but as a director, you know, I think he has this image of kind of a Clint Eastwood or Steve McQueen type guy, but as a director, he's really sensitive and thoughtful. And, you know, I just think about a scene I was doing a couple weeks ago where it was sunset and, you know, at the end of a day of this cattle drive, and, you know, the camera was on my back, but Kevin said, you know, this is your favorite part of the day. You miss your family, but you enjoy this part of the day. You know, everyone's gotten here, you're gonna rest for the night, so take it in and enjoy it. So, you know, I was telling my brother at the end of the day at work, like, about that direction. My brother was like, gosh, I really like that. And I think as an actor, you respond to kind of thoughtful, sensitive direction where it's, you know, so many times a director tells you something and I don't know, you don't connect with it, or you feel like it's more for them to hear themselves talking or something. But yeah, these guys.
He really made it very clear that we were there for a reason. He picked each of us because he knew we would be the best for this role, and imbued us with such belief that we could do it, that we could rise to this occasion and you know, climb these mountains as these characters, and you know, literally and figuratively. And he said, when we were in rehearsal, you know, there are going to be some days I'm not going to be able to give 100%, and I hope you can be there to support me on those days. And there's some days that you're not going to be able to give 100%, and I will be there to support you. And to hear a director say that, because we've all been there, where you show up and you can't do what you thought you wanted to do, and to know that he would believe that you could still do it and tell you not to doubt yourself, and that you guys would figure it out and find it together. I mean, it really just made you feel like you could play and you could try new things, and he was gonna steer us in the right direction because he's known these characters for such a long time. And it was like a trust I've never felt with a director, and it's not just because he is Kevin Costner, it's because he was able to stand on the same level with us and say, like, look, sometimes I'm not at my best. And it's okay to say that. It's a beautiful thing for a man like him to say to his actors and his team. We all felt that we were in this together. It really felt like a team effort every day.
Kevin Costner. I mean, I've been really fortunate. I got to work with him when I was 13, and then I worked with him again when I was about 24 on Hatfields and McCoys, and I've always really loved working with him as an actor. I think naturally he walks into a room and all eyes. He has a very natural, commanding, kind presence. And I felt like I had this hunch that if I ever got the opportunity to work with him as a director, that it was going to be something completely different. And it was, I feel like when he is in his zone as a director, he has this really beautiful, he almost becomes like a 4-year-old child, just like full of wonder, constantly on his feet, engaging with every aspect of the storytelling, not intimidated by setbacks, loves a good question, loves the collaboration. And I feel like they just don't make humans like that anymore, where they, walk in and all eyes go on him, but he knows that his space is of collaboration and shining a mirror to shine your light back to you, which is it's just such a gift. The name you'll know her by is Ellen Harvey, and she's somewhere in the Wyoming territory, I believe, and it seems like a story of domesticity, of childcare and dinner, but there's a lot more that will be told. She's a female vigilante in some ways. It's a really interesting character where you're presented with this idea of a woman we all know, tending a household, tending a child, killing a chicken, making dinner. But really what she's battled and persevered through to just be able to live the life that she wants in the way that she wants is the story that kind of unravels. It's interesting because, at that time, I could only imagine being a woman, you weren't given the keys to any of the households or embodiments or towns. You weren't really given anything. So everything sort of had to be begged for, stolen for, manipulated for, married into, which is still another form of, manipulation, matchmaking, and when you're not given anything, can you imagine the muscles that bloom in that space, I think that you have to work for everything. And I think, to know strength at that time was to know how to survive in a way that no one wanted you to survive. That there was no world for an independent woman. So any type of independence that was cultivated was not only unspoken of, but it was a threat. Between Michael and I, we had a really lovely tag, all of our things were together. We had to build this whole world together, and he's just an amazing actor that, you throw anything at him and he'll just eat it for lunch. So it was a really lovely ensemble. Abbey and I had worked together prior on a film, The Neon Demon, where we also kind of had an adversarial type of relationship. So we were like, oh, we've got this. We know how to get into each other's faces and play. I love ensembles, because for me, it's like, of course, every actor wants to bring their best, and usually you can kind of tell what other actors are doing, but it's sort of like you don't know what everyone's doing. And so maybe in some strange way, it kind of eggs you on to do even more, to go even further. And then getting to watch the film and just see how incredible everyone was. I was just so proud of them, and the choices that they made. Those landscapes haven't changed that much, The landscapes that were happening at that time are still happening today. We could still live in dirt, There's a lot of ways, the past never dies, right? We carry the past inside of us. We have our great-grandmother's histories written on our DNAs, and it's just certain appearances of things change, but really there's nothing new under the sun, right? We're all just kind of thinking that we're having these new ideas, but really, you go out there and it's harsh. Even for me as a modern human mother with a tiny child, similar situations, it's harsh. I don't want my child in the sun for too long, or where are we going to eat? Make sure you do this, or what are your activities in a desert? What is safe? What is not? I don't know, it felt nice to feel like not a lot has changed, but that everything has changed. It was nice to sort of find those bridges. in some ways I thought I was creating a character, like a historical character, right? That was sort of based on maybe women's lives in the past, but something about the reclamation of building this woman and putting my body into it and my experiences, it felt like a very healing experience. You know, I think I've been learning a lot about just how we carry trauma and through epigenetics and learning about our DNA and how, you know, our great, 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 great grandmothers are still alive in our bodies. And in some ways, it's not that their stories weren't told, you know, they didn't, of course they had stories. They just were silenced, you know, they were unsung. And I felt like there was something that happened inside of me to be able to bring these stories to life, to give them a voice, to sing them. It felt like healing generations of lost trauma, you know, like something, it felt very sci-fi and kind of cool in a way. And I didn't expect to have that kind of experience, you know. What I love about movies and what I've always loved about movies is you just don't know what you're going to experience, you know? I love that unknowing. And some people might think it's a comedy and some people might do this and some people really saw this one moment that affected them for the rest of their life. And some people, you know, got up and got candy at the wrong moment. You know, you just never know how a movie is going to affect you. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts of the art form, is that you can't put it in front of an audience and say, this is dramatic, you know? It's just not the case, because some people will be in a drama and they'll be laughing, you know, they'll feel so uncomfortable they'll start laughing. Or they'll see something that they don't love and then 15 years later pick that same movie up and be bawling like a little child, you know? And so I just hope that they go because they love movies, you know? And I love movies, and I'm always willing to give a film a chance.
I got a call. It was like maybe 11:30 in the morning. I'd just gotten up maybe like an hour earlier, and it was Kevin on the phone. And I clicked on it. I was told that he was going to call, so it was a FaceTime call type thing. And there you have it. You know, we hadn't seen each other since JFK, and it'd been years and years, and I was surprised and loving it, and I was ready to go. I think Kevin's a fantastic director, you know. I definitely, I've worked with a bunch of folks, and you know, as good as any, better than most. So there you have it. Because Kevin, pretty much. I've done one big Western, Tombstone, in my past, and I really enjoyed it. I don't even consider this a Western. In reality, this is a story of people just like ourselves, but placed in a time that requires tremendous gumption and focus and physical endurance and a drive and a dream, most importantly, for better life, for a new life, to get away from the inner cities and the heat and the crime and just like we have today. Many people want to move out to the countryside, but the folks back in the 1860s, their moving out to the countryside meant gathering all their belongings, their children, their pets, everything, putting them in a wagon and going west. So every time I fly across the country, I look down, and even before I had signed on for Horizon, this is like years ago, I couldn't believe the vastness, the openness, the distances that we humans traveled to get somewhere west, right? I think a lot of people don't even know where they wanted to go west. They just wanted to go west. They wanted to go that way. And I've always been like just amazed at that vista, and just to put a human being in the middle of that with a wagon and a mule, and amazing, amazing. I play a fellow by the name of Riordan. I'm a sergeant major in the Union Army. Most likely I joined early on as a teenager, and it's just been a lifelong thing, lifelong job. I probably met my wife early on, and we've been together probably for about 40 years or more. And she's with me at the fort. We're out west. We're in probably the most westward Union or outpost, Army outpost, and we're there to basically, before the wagon trains kind of roll through, and the pioneers that come through, they can take refuge there and replenish, and then move on, maybe, who knows, or stay. So the fort is quite a little sanctuary and town of its own. And that's what I do. I'm the adjutant to not the general, but the colonel. And I do all his paperwork, and I I also kind of semi-manage the goings-on at the fort. In this one, the first chapter 1, I do a lot of that type of stuff, and that's kind of what I do. I'm like personal assistant, bookkeeper, problem solver. I take care of the men. I run them through their exercises and training, and I do a little bit of everything, and that's my job. They're really fantastic. We all became friends, and it's like that with almost every job. You become somewhat of a weird kind of family, for as long as it takes, and then you move on and you do another film, and then you either keep in touch or you don't. Some of the friendships that I've made, they're lifetime friendships, and I've known James Gunn forever. I've known Kevin since JFK, and so many times we stay connected. Sometimes we don't, and then when we reconnect, it's kind of like almost like I just saw you yesterday. So we pick up almost immediately where we left off, and that's a good sign of a friendship made and solidified from before. That's kind of what happens. I think that's important. That's important for my character in this piece, and that's what I do. I'm not only stuck in the office with the colonel. I go out and I go out and about and do my day. My day is like meeting and greeting and talking and fixing and playing and chasing down chickens and teaching young people how to ride, that sort of stuff. And what a lovely character. And I haven't seen her since the movie, so I'm sure she's grown a foot. Granted, it's a beautiful setting, it's a lovely backdrop, and it's part of the environment that we live in. But it was hot. And we're wearing period wardrobe clothing, and it's 1/8 of an inch thick wool, plus undergarments. Amazing. But that environment was really daunting. you had to. It also gives you that, wow, the folks that lived back then. You know, it was just they were tough individuals, and being in a military outfit, it kind of is a little bit physically tough on the body. It's rough on the body. I don't know. I think people say the wool is insulation, but you got to be used to maybe 110 for your insulation. You know, so it was quite amazing. A lot of people feel that their wardrobe helps them get into the character. I could have done it in a pair of shorts and T-shirt. I'm fine with that, you know. But no, we got to wear the real stuff. Acting, gosh. I went back over some old photos of my ancestors just recently on my phone, and I'm looking at them. And because I'm getting ready, I know we're about ready to premiere and all that stuff, and I'm looking at these photos, you know, grandfather, great grandfather, great 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 grandfather, that kind of stuff, really far back, and it just brought me emotionally. It was like, yes, these are the people that are a part of your tree, right? My only thought was when I was looking at them, I was like, I mean, these folks could pull the covered wagon. They were rough. They were tough. There was not an ounce of fat on their bones, and they were all muscle and sinew. Not only the men, the women as well, were as rough and tumble and tough and just unforgiving as the men. And so, that being said, it was amazing to see some of these old photos and me doing this. And you know, even back when I did look down from the plane, I was like, I've always sort of, I think I was always meant to do this.